Then we're going to have Mike Carr from the City of St. John, who's on the phone with us. Good day, Mike. Okay. And then we will take questions from the reporters. So, Monsieur le Premier ministre, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. J'apprécie tout le travail que vous faites comme média pour communiquer avec les gens du Nouveau-Brunswick. Thank you very much to all of you for being here yet again. We very much appreciate all the work that the media is doing to communicate with New Brunswickers what is happening in the regions that are affected. Notre priorité absolue est et continue d'être la sécurité de la population du Nouveau-Brunswick. Les derniers jours ont été difficiles pour beaucoup. Les niveaux d'eau se sont élevés rapidement et nous pensons à ceux et celles qui ont été affectés par les inondations. Je vais prendre un moment pour remercier toutes les personnes qui ont participé aux interventions d'urgence dans les régions affectées et qui ont travaillé sans arrêt pour maintenir la sécurité publique. Nous levons notre chapeau à nos premiers intervenants pour le travail acharné qu'ils font pour garder les gens de notre province en sécurité. Nous demandons aux gens du Nouveau-Brunswick de continuer d'être patients au cours des prochains jours. Pour le moment, le sud de la province constitue la plus grande source de préoccupation, mais l'Organisation des mesures d'urgence du Nouveau-Brunswick continue de surveiller de près les niveaux d'eau dans les communautés du nord de la province. À Fredericton, les niveaux d'eau sont relativement stables. In some areas along the St. John River watershed, it is anticipated that water levels will exceed record levels set in 1973. If you have not done so already, please make sure you protect your home and belongings and make arrangements to leave impacted areas should conditions worsen. Si vous voulez quitter votre maison, veuillez appeler la Croix-Rouge au 1-800-863-6582. If you want to leave your home, please call the Red Cross at 1-800-863-6582. Nous encourageons fortement les gens du Nouveau-Brunswick à continuer de s'informer. Toute personne qui souhaite obtenir des prévisions actualisées sur les niveaux anticipés au cours des 48 prochaines heures peut trouver ces informations sur le site web du gouvernement du Nouveau-Brunswick à gnb.ca. As was announced yesterday, disaster financial assistance will be available to help ease the financial burden for residents who have been impacted by the flood or who will be impacted by the flood. New Brunswickers who have been affected by flooding are encouraged to contact us to see what type of financial support they can receive. And again, we ask them to document as much of the damage that they would have seen to their properties as possible, whether it be photos, whether it be receipts of things that they have bought because of the damage. This will help their claims, whether it be through their insurer or whether it be through the Disaster Financial Assistance Program. The program provides assistance for eligible damage and losses that threaten health and safety of individuals, municipalities, and small businesses. People can report their damages at 1-888-298-8555 or by registering online. The damage assessments will be reviewed, and health and safety inspection teams may be dispatched if required. Advance payments against the total value of an eligible claim may be authorized to pay for urgent work that will enable owners to reoccupy their residencies. Residents affected by flooding are entitled to a number of complimentary services as well. So fees will be waived for water well testing, electrical permits, and collection of flood debris in local service districts. Assurer la sécurité des Néo-Brunswickoises et Néo-Brunswickois est notre priorité en ce moment. L'aide financière en cas de catastrophe sera disponible pour alléger le fardeau financier des résidents qui ont été touchés par les inondations. Les Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises qui ont été touchés par les inondations sont encouragés à communiquer avec nous en composant le 1-888-298-8555 ou en se rendant sur notre site web. Voici quelques rappels pour les gens. Restez à l'écart des rivières. La navigation de plaisance dans ces eaux est très dangereuse car les courants sont rapides et vigoureux et l'eau est froide et remplie de débris. Nous demandons aussi que les résidents respectent les fermetures de routes. Ignorer ou déplacer les barricades et circuler sur des routes fermées met votre vie et celle des autres en danger. We encourage New Brunswickers to check on neighbors who may require assistance. Residents affected by floodwater who do not have access to alternative accommodations can contact, again, the Red Cross at 1-800-863-6582. The Department of Transportation and Infrastructure has advised that Route 2 between Moncton and Fredericton will soon be closed to all traffic as water levels continue to rise. This closure will affect both eastbound and westbound lanes. Those traveling between Moncton and Fredericton would be detoured to Route 1 through Riverglade and Route 7 at Oromocto. I encourage residents to monitor 511 for the latest updates on road conditions and closures. Le ministère des Transports et de l'Infrastructure a fait savoir que la route 2 entre Moncton et Fredericton sera fermée à toute la circulation bientôt en raison de l'augmentation continue des niveaux d'eau. Les automobilistes circulant entre Moncton et Fredericton devraient alors passer par la route 1 à Riverglade et à la route 7 à Oromocto. J'encourage les citoyens à composer le 511 pour obtenir des mises à jour sur les conditions routières et les fermetures de route. It is clear that due to flooding, there will be houses and families that are isolated. We will be managing a long and complex event, and we will need to support New Brunswickers in many ways. We are therefore taking steps to increase our capacity and capability for marine operations. We have requested assistance from the Canadian Coast Guard. The federal government has granted our request and will help us reach out to those impacted. Our first priority is life-saving assistance. We will evacuate people who are unable to evacuate safely, and for those who remain behind, we will ensure that emergency medical service is available and that officials can support those impacted. Il est évident qu'il y aura des maisons et des familles qui seront isolées en raison des inondations. Nous gérerons un événement long et complexe et nous devrons aider la population de notre province. Nous avons demandé à la Garde côtière canadienne de nous aider à assurer que les gens seront en sécurité dans les régions qui sont affectées. Aider à sauver des vies est notre priorité absolue. Nous évacuerons les personnes qui sont incapables de le faire elles-mêmes et dans le cas de celles qui ont décidé de rester, nous nous assurerons qu'un service médical est disponible en cas d'urgence et que les autorités soient en mesure d'appuyer les personnes touchées. The government continues to urge New Brunswickers whose road access is cut off or about to be cut off to evacuate until the water recedes. The New Brunswick Emergency Measures Organization and the Canadian Coast Guard are working together to determine the details of the Coast Guard's involvement. In addition, we are grateful that businesses are stepping up to help. Businesses like Cook Aquaculture, which dispatched 3 boats and professional personnel to embark on flood relief efforts in the Grand Bay Westfield and Kennebecasis Valley areas. This support is very much appreciated as we try to make sure New Brunswickers are safe during this time. L'Organisation des mesures d'urgence du Nouveau-Brunswick et la Garde côtière canadienne travaillent en collaboration afin de préciser de quelle façon la Garde côtière contribuera à l'intervention et fera la même sorte de collaboration avec les entreprises qui nous offrent des ressources. Nous sommes extrêmement reconnaissants pour cette aide au moment où nous tentons d'assurer la sécurité de la population de notre province. And one last note, Canadians looking to help people impacted by flooding here in New Brunswick can now make financial donations via the Canadian Red Cross. Donations can be made online at redcross.ca or by calling the toll-free number 1-800-418-1111 and specify that the donation is for the New Brunswick Floods Appeal. We thank everybody in advance for their thoughts to get New Brunswickers and help New Brunswickers get through the floods. We thank all of those that will be willing to make a donation. Every little bit counts, there's no doubt. And we thank everybody that has been helping us get through this. A big thank you again to EMO, a big thank you to all our first responders, a big thank you to New Brunswickers that have stepped up as well. And I've had the chance to travel over the last few days visiting communities that have been impacted by the floods, and I've been inspired by the amount of New Brunswickers that are stepping up to help their neighbors. Today in Grand Bay Westfield, there were school children that were helping fill sandbags so that we could protect some of the homes in that area. We witnessed community leaders stepping up. We witnessed New Brunswickers doing everything they can to help their neighbors prepare and try to secure their belongings. We really appreciate what everybody is doing, and it's by working together like this that we're going to make sure that everybody gets through this. So thank you again for all of your help and all of your patience. With all of that said, I will now cede the floor to Greg McCallum from EMO. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, sir. Well, as you've heard, St. John, communities south of here have all reached record highs, and the water's still rising. So past experience in floods may no longer be enough to safely assess the situation. For some people, this is uncharted territory. So I want to encourage, again, those people that are at risk in those locations, south of Fredericton and all the way to St. John, to have an evacuation plan and to be considering whether or not an evacuation in their circumstances is the most appropriate course of action. We understand that this requires and necessitates upheaval in people's lives. But for those that it is still possible, it is important to, if you're going to make the decision to evacuate, do so in daylight hours and while you can still do it by road. A night evacuation by boat is a dangerous and risky operation, and if we don't have to go there, we don't want to. So people, if they're wondering if they should evacuate or not, they should err on the side of caution. They need to be assessing the situation on an ongoing basis and asking themselves, how resilient am I? And how much can I tolerate before I need assistance? I want to talk a little bit about local conditions here in Fredericton. We're describing the downstream effects of all this flooding, but locally here we still have issues that have persisted for the last several days and will persist for a while yet. So people shouldn't, in the Fredericton area, expect any rapid changes. The water level has been fluctuating around 8 meters now for a number of days. And you'll see from time to time it'll dip slightly below in the 7, 9 something range, but it might bob back up as well. So no dramatic changes, calls for patience and understanding, of course, and tolerance. We understand that as well. We know people are tired and they're frustrated. And it's at that time where we call on people to do that gut check, make sure that they're patient and considerate of others, and just realize that these things happen and they need to cooperate with others and get through this. We don't want them taking the risks I've been talking about for a number of days. Stay off the water courses. There's still debris and there's still high, fast-flowing water that's cold. You've heard and you'll hear more about road closures and the constraints and limitations they impose. Those are the current conditions, and there is nothing that can be done about those except ensure they're safely arranged, safely monitored, and people safely obey them. If NB Power has to de-energize homes, and they will in some cases, as they have already, you have to wait for professionals to do the reconnections and inspections. Not a job for amateurs. So we're talking about patience, and I would characterize what's going on now, especially in the region south of here, progressively, is that it becomes resource intensive. And there's a lot of people that are seeking information about sandbags and where they can source them and where they can get these. There have been extraordinary efforts made, and successfully so, to pre-position sandbags and supplies of sand at key locations throughout the impacted areas. This is being broadly forecast, but if someone doesn't know, all they need to do is phone the EMO numbers that are well known now and well published, and they can be directed to where they need to be. Emergency Operations Centers are coordinating this effectively, and as you've heard, additional resources are being brought to bear from the federal government. And that is an ongoing assessment of the situation. And as Premier Gallant has mentioned, whatever is needed will be resourced and will be utilized to best effect. So we want to ensure that people understand that everything necessary to be done is being done and will continue to be done until we see this operation through to a successful completion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Greg. Hamid Dasuki is Director of Operations at the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you all. As the Premier has already mentioned, DTI and its P3 partner MRDC have now made the decision to close the Fredericton to Moncton Highway tonight at 7 p.m. It's a situation we've been monitoring closely for the last 18 hours or so. This morning, when we realized that a closure was probably imminent, we decided to advise the public to give an opportunity to do any traveling they may have to do in advance of the closure. We recognize that this presents a significant inconvenience to travelers. It's a long detour, Route 7 at Ormocto, to Route 1 in St. John, to Route 2 at Riverglade for eastbound traffic, Route 1 to Riverglade, to Route 7 in St. John, to Route 2 at Ormocto for westbound traffic. It is in the best interest of public safety, and that is our main priority right now. We've made every attempt to inform the public, and we've contacted our neighboring jurisdictions who will have signage in place to inform traffic headed into New Brunswick. It is impossible to say how long the detour will be in place. At this time, we're just waiting for the water levels to recede. The safe assumption is that this will be for several days. Please respect the barricades and check nb511.ca for the latest road closures. Drive with caution in areas where water is over the road. Watch out for wildlife, and please do not stop in traffic to take photographs. At this time, we have close to 140 assets impacted, including 81 complete closures. There are also some partial closures and some roads with water over them that we're actively monitoring. The number of assets affected is continuously fluctuating. 511 is your best source for up-to-date information on road closures. Our river ferry services continue to be affected. At this time, all but one of our ferry services is off service. Gondola Point remains in service, and it's seeing increased traffic. Passengers should expect delays. The Department of Transportation and Infrastructure appreciates the public patience as we respond to this flooding event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Jasmine? Our next speaker is Jasmine Boisvert, who is the Water Resources Specialist at the Department of Environment and Local Government.
Thank you. Today I'll provide a brief update on current 5-day forecasts. I would also encourage media outlets to remind the general public that these forecasts are updated every day and accessible around 1 p.m. on gnb.ca/Riverwatch website under the latest forecast links. Copies of these forecasts are also distributed here today for you to pick up. Merci. Aujourd'hui, je vous fournirai une mise à jour des prévisions pour les 5 prochains jours. J'encourage les médias à rappeler à la population que ces prévisions sont mises à jour quotidiennement disponibles vers 13 heures sur le site du programme de surveillance des cours d'eau, sur le site web du gouvernement du Nouveau-Brunswick. Nous avons également des copies de ces prévisions ici aujourd'hui. Over the last 40 hours, last night we had minor amounts of precipitation that fell throughout most of the province. Maximum amounts were observed to be around 10 millimeters in the southeast and central parts of the province. The amounts of actual rainfall were significantly less than what was predicted by Environment and Climate Change Canada, particularly northern parts of the province. Au nord de la province, les niveaux d'eau sont généralement élevés et les municipalités de Saint-Hilaire et Edmundston se trouvent toujours au-dessus du niveau d'inondation. Les prévisions indiquent que ces niveaux d'eau baisseront lentement au cours des prochains jours. Cependant, il faut garder en tête que tout dépendra des précipitations prévues pour vendredi et samedi. In the north, water levels are still generally high, with Saint-Hilaire and Edmundston still above flood stage. These water levels are forecast to slowly lower over the next few days. However, this will depend on actual precipitation amounts that will be received from the forecasted weather system on Friday and Saturday. Since yesterday, water levels in the Fredericton region remained relatively the same, from 8.12 meters yesterday to 7.92 meters today at 7 a.m. In Majorville, water levels were at 7.03 meters, while today they're at 7.06 meters, just a slight increase. And in Jemseg, water levels went from 6.33 meters to 6.46 meters. Grand Lake water levels have risen from an estimated 6.55 meters from 6.44 meters yesterday. Sheffield Lakeville Corner similarly had water levels rise to 6.75 meters from 6.63 yesterday. Oak Point, a very similar story again, is that water levels were at 5.44 meters yesterday and they rose to 5.64, a 20 centimeter increase. In Quispamsis St. John, water levels went from 5.11 meters to 5.34. At the present time, according to most current data, we are expecting that the flooding in the lower St. John River Basin from Fredericton all the way down to St. John will continue for at least the next 5 days. À l'heure actuelle, les plus récentes données montrent que les inondations dans le bassin inférieur du fleuve Saint-Jean, allant de Fredericton à Saint-Jean comme tel, devraient se poursuivre pendant au moins les prochains 5 jours. For southern regions of the St. John River Basin, our 5-day forecast indicates that for Fredericton, water levels are predicted to remain stable or near the 7.8 meter mark for the next 72 hours, and then with a possibility of a start of a decline. This is still early, so this may change. For Majorville, water levels are forecast to remain stable around 7 meters over the next 5 days, with a very slow decline being somewhat likely. For Jemseg, water levels should stay stable around the 6.6 meter mark, with a possible decline on the 5th day as well. Again, I would like to remind you that this is 5 days out, and so it's still very early to tell. For Grand Lake, water levels should stay stable or rise and then stay stable to the 6.7 meter mark. Whereas in the Sheffield Lakeville Corner regions, water levels should again rise but stay stable around the 6.8 meter mark over the next few days. In Oak Point, water levels are forecasted to rise to 6.0 meters over the next 72 hours. And in the Quispamsis St. John area, water levels are forecasted to rise to 5.9 meters over the next 4 days. Residents in these regions, such as Grand Lake, Gagetown, Hampstead, Washtenamowick, Oak Point, Belle Isle, Grand Bay, Westfield, Quispamsis, and St. John, as well as in the smaller communities in this area, are urged to be ready for flooding. Anyone living near the river or its branches should remain on high alert, including residents who have never experienced flooding in the past. The forecasted water levels are higher than both the 2008 and 1973 water levels in many regions, including Jemseg, Grand Lake, Sheffield Lakeville Corner, Oak Point, and Quispamsis St. John. Les résidents des régions du sud du bassin de la rivière Saint-Jean, incluant les résidents qui n'ont jamais subi d'inondation dans le passé, doivent demeurer en état d'alerte élevé. Les niveaux d'eau au sud de Fredericton augmentent au cours des prochains jours. To be clear, these forecasts are subject to change depending on upcoming day-to-day weather. Please continue to monitor the Riverwatch website for the latest information, as a new forecast is posted every day before 1 p.m. Je le rappelle encore que ces prévisions pourraient changer selon les conditions météorologiques et je vous encourage à consulter le site du programme de surveillance des cours d'eau pour les informations les plus récentes. Les nouvelles prévisions sont affichées chaque jour environ à 13 heures. Merci. Thank you.
Merci, Jocelyn. On va prendre les questions après, on n'a pas terminé. I will now ask Mr. Michael Carr over the phone from St. John, New Brunswick. Mike, are you with us?
I am with you.
Okay, what's going on in St. John?
All right, thank you, Premier Gallant and Director McCollum. I'd just like to build on the previous unified message specifically for St. John. St. John Emergency Management Organization is warning that the water levels continue to rise and expect to continue as do so from our last report to at least Sunday. It is possible that those living in those affected areas on the St. John River in our city and those identified on our evacuation map may lose power, water, and or sewer services. More residents will also be cut off and isolated as roads become impassable, and first responders may not be able to reach those areas, although we are working on contingency plans. Unique, NB Southern Railroad is providing a free one-way evacuation shuttle service via rail to those residents along the Westfield Road and area. This includes everyone in Morna Heights, Belmont, Ketipek, Accomack, and South Bay. This area consists of 599 houses and over 1,400 residents. The first shuttle will run today at 4 p.m., and more trips will be added as needed during the daylight hours only. We are planning to evacuate other isolated areas, including those along the that are accessible by boat, and those detailed plans will be confirmed at a later time. Taking into consideration the tidal fluctuations in St. John, our current flood level is 4.34 meters, but we are expected to be over 6 meters at high tide on Sunday. Currently, our tide is at 3:05 p.m. This is evolving and in some cases unpredictable event, especially with the tidal fluctuations. So we fully expect to see flood levels above what they were in 1973, as mentioned by Premier Gallant. Safety of the members of St. John EMO, all responding agencies and support services, and residents is our #1 priority. Asking people to leave while they can on their own is strongly urged to evacuate today. Not to drive through flooded areas or around any barricades, avoid boating, and exercise caution when entering waterways. Turn off propane tanks. We've had incidences of floating open tanks that are discharging into the waterway. And we are going door to door for those isolated areas with flyers with evacuation information. Services that we are providing, resources are evacuation support. We are providing accommodations through the Canadian Red Cross. We have 2 sandbag locations, west and north. Currently, we have over 10,000 sandbags that we have provided with additional supplies arriving, and we expect to exceed 15,000 sandbags by Friday. Support has been offered by Province of New Brunswick, local organizations, agencies, and utilities. And all current information can be found at www.stjohn.ca. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. We will not take questions from the reporters, but I want to mention first that in the room we have Ali Murchison with the Red Cross. We have Mr. Wayne Talon with the City of Fredericton, and we have Marie-André Bolduc from NB Power. Marie-André, there you go. And yes, questions from the media. CBC.
CBC. We've seen a lot of people filling sandbags, a lot of people asking for volunteers, a lot of people asking for help in just moving stuff out of flood zones, moving stuff out of basements. At what point would we be looking at maybe the military being called in?
Mr. Premier Minister,
every day there's a conversation with EMO and all of its partners about what type of resources are needed, if there's an exhaustion of resources or of people in any of the regions. So it's an ongoing evaluation of what resources, how our resources are doing, and if there are any needs for additional resources in certain regions. We have to keep in mind that when we do ask for extra resources, it has to be because it's going to help our efforts. And we believe asking the Canadian Coast Guard to come in and help us ensure that we're able to get to anybody in an emergency situation and to help those that have been impacted and maybe cut off because of flooding is the right move. That's the right type of resource that we need from the federal government at this moment. I can't speak for the military. They are, as I think they have mentioned yesterday and the day before, they are evaluating the situation as well, and they're in constant communication with officials of EMO and all the partners. Bringing in the Army to help people move their things would probably would not happen. The Army would be brought in if there are emergency situations, if there are the need to be able to get to more people at the same time for emergency situations. So it would not be possible to ask them to help have people move their belongings to higher ground. Now, with that said, we do have amazing volunteers and people that are helping New Brunswickers move their belongings to higher ground, preparing with sandbags, trying to do everything they can to stop the damage of the flood. And we certainly understand that. We are sympathetic to that. And in fact, we spent the day today helping New Brunswickers do exactly that. And As was mentioned by Mr. Carr, we've had 10,000 sandbags in the Greater St. John region filled by volunteers and New Brunswickers just wanting to help. With that said, we are definitely doing everything we can to strike the right balance of being very serious about our ask that people that are impacted by the floods and those that will be impacted by the floods, especially those that could be cut off because of road infrastructure being flooded, that they evacuate their homes. We are going to leave people that choice for now. We obviously reserve the right to make an ongoing evaluation of the case, but we strongly encourage people to seek alternative accommodations. If you have friends or family that can help you with accommodations, then that's great. If you don't, there is the Red Cross, and you can call 1-800-863-6582 to seek alternative accommodations. Now, with that said, we are aware, practically speaking, there are people that are going to try to stay in their homes as long as possible, and some may stay in their homes and have floods happen so quickly that they are a bit surprised to what extent they found themselves isolated in a very sort of a quick and swift way. So we are bringing in the Canadian Coast Guard. We are going to increase our capacity to be able to get to the people that may be isolated at this point or may be isolated in the future, to help them with emergency situations and to support them to get through this. One thing that I want to mention, although we will have boats that are helping to transport people, there could be a section of the impacted areas that when they pick up the person from the home to maybe go help them with some of the endeavors and get some basic necessities, that they may not be able to get back to the home. That is definitely possible as water levels could continue to rise, as there could be stronger currents, there could be debris or other reasons as to why it would be unsafe. So we again really stress that people that are in the flooded impact, the impacted areas and those that could be impacted moving forward, especially with regards to being cut off because of road infrastructure being flooded, that they evacuate. Again, we're going to leave the choice to them, and we recognize, and I'll repeat it, we saw people today not leaving their homes because they're trying to protect their homes and protect their belongings, and we can completely understand and sympathize with that. But obviously, we want to make sure that New Brunswickers are doing so in a way that they're also keeping themselves, their families, and first responders that will ultimately be there to help them safe. So with that said, we're asking for the Canadian Coast Guard to come help us, because that's the type of resource that we need at this moment to ensure we're monitoring those that could be isolated at this moment or isolated in the coming hours and days. But again, we say that with advising and asking people to evacuate if they're in that situation or that they will be in that situation.
Question? Another question?
We've been in a lot of basements. People who are trying to move stuff out. We've talked with farmers who have worked so hard to move their livestock, move their property. We've talked to a lot of people who said they've lost a lot of things. There's a lot of damage to their property, but it could have been so much less if they had only gotten a little bit more warning. Why was there not more of a heads up before this flooding happened?
I'll certainly let Greg speak, but I will just add this before I let him talk about some of the measures that have been put in place over the last few days. When you have these type of weather events like we're seeing here, like we saw a little over a year ago with the ice storm, we are seeing weather events like we've never seen before. I mean, this is most likely going to end up being the largest, most impactful flood that we have ever recorded here in New Brunswick. So it certainly puts us to the test. It certainly puts all of our resources and people to the test, and there will be things that we'll have to improve on. And that was the case for our response to the ice storm over a year ago, although I think that everybody stepped up and did a great job. There's no doubt that it was quite the test, and it was an opportunity for us to see what worked well and what didn't work well and improve. And there's no doubt that this flood will help us improve moving forward as well. So there's going to be a time once we get everybody through this, that we will have to sit down and ask ourselves what went well, what didn't go as well as it should have, and what could we do to make sure that we're continuously getting better at responding to these type of weather events. Greg?
To your question about advance notice, I want to remind people that we've been warning about flooding since last Wednesday. I think this is Thursday now. I'm not talking about yesterday, I mean last Wednesday. At that time, we were telling people to expect flood conditions. Hard to quantify how deep it's going to be, and you've heard much talk about accuracy over 48 hours, forecasting thereafter. We have to accept that Mother Nature and all the variable conditions that were involved in the evolution of this flooding event are variable, first of all, and at the same time, almost impossible to predict in some ways. The big factor in this one was how rapid was a melt in combination with a coincident rainfall. And as good as the science is, as good as a predictive capability is in our hydrology section, this is a signal or a sentinel event that tells us that at the end of the day, the weather is going to decide the rate of flooding. And models are excellent, and models are used, and most of the time are extremely accurate. And they were, except that the timeline was much more rapid and literally ran ahead of the model. There is a great deal of applied science to determining this. And in this instance, as the Premier mentioned, you know, every effort will be made to improve that capability. But it's never going to be perfect because weather can surprise you. And by way of analogy, if you hear a 5-day weather forecast, it's a great Canadian tradition to be cynical about what it's going to be like 5 days from now. Well, consider a 5-day flood forecast to be analogous. It's a scientific estimation. Remember, it's an estimation. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Any more questions? D'autres questions?
Sait-on combien de personnes et puis combien de bateaux la garde côtière va amener au Nouveau-Brunswick?
Oui. En effet, nous sommes dans des discussions avec la garde côtière en ce moment pour voir exactement quelles sortes de ressources, combien de bateaux, combien de personnel et où les personnes seront déployées. Je peux vous dire que ça sera quand même, je pense, assez de bateaux et assez de personnel. Avec ce dit, ça va être aussi une évaluation constante. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on a besoin aujourd'hui? Ce ne sera pas nécessairement ce qu'on a besoin demain ou dans les jours à venir. Alors, la garde côtière, jusqu'à maintenant, a été fantastique à travailler avec. Ils nous disent, garde, si vous avez besoin plus, on peut les amener. Si vous en aurez besoin d'un peu moins, on peut les ramener. Alors, nous sommes dans les discussions et ça va commencer dans les heures à venir où les gens, les personnels de la garde côtière vont commencer à nous aider à faire en sorte que les familles, les communautés qui sont isolées vont avoir une présence pour assurer leur sécurité.
Donc, avant la fin de la journée, il y a des gens de la garde canadienne qui sont sur place.
Exactement.
D'autres questions?
En anglais?
Yeah. So we are in discussions at the moment with the Canadian Coast Guard to evaluate exactly how many boats we need, how many personnel we would need, exactly where they would be deployed. And it will be an ongoing evaluation. What we need today may not be what we need tomorrow or in the days to come. We have been very pleased with the cooperation, and they have told us that by the end of the day, we'll already have personnel from the Canadian Coast Guard helping us ensure that families, communities that are isolated because of the floods will get the presence to ensure their security.
You can't say how many today.
At this point, we're in discussions at the moment, but in the next few hours, there will already be members of the Canadian Coast Guard helping us with those goals.
A couple of years ago, the Insurance Bureau of Canada told the Legislature Committee that there were people in low-lying areas along the St. John River who were suddenly eligible for flood coverage. It was a new product being offered by lots of insurance companies, starting in 2015, saying that they could get overland flood coverage, and they might not know it. And they raised this because it would mean, in effect, that they didn't get that flood coverage and they were eligible for it, they would not be eligible for disaster assistance from government. So I'm wondering if the government has a sense of how many people this would affect right now. We've seen that there are a lot of properties damaged and there will be more damage over the coming days. How many of those people could potentially be ruled out for disaster relief?
Well, really, yeah, well, I got an answer as well. Really, I think the answer will practically become no one. It's true that assistance is unavailable to people who have insurance available for overland flooding and choose not to get it, but it's important to note a few things. If flood insurance was available, but beyond the person's means, they will be eligible for assistance. So that's point number one that I think is very important for people to be aware of. If someone bought insurance when no flood insurance was available, and some company then made it available after the fact without their knowing, they will be eligible for assistance. And I think that would describe a lot of the people that you just described. We know both government and the insurance industry have done a lot of things and made a lot of efforts to inform people that flood insurance is becoming more accessible than it used to be. But we also know that those efforts haven't necessarily reached everyone. So you can be assured that those that did go and get their insurance that did not at that time did not cover this type of event, and then subsequent to that, it would cover the event, that we will obviously take that into account and ensure that nobody is penalized because of that. At the end of the day, it is very clear what we're trying to accomplish. The reason this is in place, I mean, every New Brunswicker would want us to help any New Brunswicker that has been impacted, but the reason this is in place is because we don't want government to then become the insurer. If people can get insurance, obviously we would, I think all as a society, prefer that people get the insurance that they need to be able to keep their families, their possessions, and their property safe. So we do not want to take the place of the insurers. But at the end of the day, if there is not insurance or they weren't aware that that insurance was available, then we want to be there to help them. We do not want anybody to have the financial hardship that could come without having that type of coverage. And that's why we have the Disaster Financial Assistance Program, and that's why we're going to do everything we can to communicate it. And again, I appreciate everything that media is doing to let people know. I mean, it's very difficult for a lot of families out there, and it's an important message for them to keep documentation of their damage, take photos, keep receipts, get anything that they may use to, whether it be through the insurance company or whether it be through the disaster financial assistance with us in the federal government's program. It will be a lot easier for their claims if they have all those documents.
So are you confident then between the insurance and the disaster program that no one will be left behind for the damages there?
Well, I think I'd like to think that that will be the case within the parameters of the program, right? There is the federal government's criteria that we're able to that we must follow so that we're able to qualify for the disaster financial assistance program. So you're all going to be able to find situations where there's been damage and there wouldn't be coverage. But at the end of the day, for people's primary residences, for the type of damage that is within the disaster financial assistance criteria, we will be there for people if they don't have insurance, and if they had the ability to have their insurance but weren't aware that there was a change within their business, we will cover that as well.
Given the flooding that's happened, how much consideration do you think you'll give to the idea that the government should begin buying out people who are in flood zones, their properties, and the idea that there should be a provincial law that people shouldn't be able to build in flood zones?
So a few things. I mean, I don't ever want to say that one isolated weather event is because of climate change. The frequency and the severity of the weather events, we believe, is due to climate change. So a few things on that when it comes to sort of the macro policies that we have to enact as a government to be more proactive about these things. We have to do everything we can to combat climate change. We have to do everything we can to mitigate versus climate change. We have to do everything we can to raise awareness about climate change and how New Brunswickers and Canadians and people across the globe can help us combat it. And we have to do a better job of mapping out where there are flood zones, where there will be the potential for flood zones in the future, where there will be erosion, what can be done to protect our coasts and to protect our communities because of rising weather events due to climate change.
J'ai deux questions. Première question, j'aimerais savoir exactement qu'est-ce que la garde côtière va faire. Je suis pas sûr de comprendre clairement ce qu'ils vont faire. Est-ce qu'ils vont avoir des bateaux, ils vont aller chez les résidents parce que dans le communiqué de presse, c'est pas clair. J'aimerais savoir aussi le détour, ça va être donc comment, quelle sorte de détour en termes de durée ça va être.
En termes du détour, je vais demander au département de transport et infrastructure de vous communiquer. Bien sûr, c'est un détour assez significatif, là. On parle évidemment d'une artère d'infrastructure très important pour la province. Alors, nous sommes très reconnaissants de la patience que les gens vont démontrer envers le fait qu'il va y avoir des barricades sur cette route. Concernant la garde côtière, je veux dire, vous avez demandé hier si on allait demander pour la Force armée canadienne. Nous ne demandons pas pour la Force armée canadienne en ce moment parce que nous avons fait une analyse des ressources que nous avons besoin et la garde côtière peut nous aider davantage comparé à la Force armée canadienne en ce moment. Et la raison pour ça, c'est parce que nous avons des communautés, nous avons des familles, nous avons des maisons et nous allons avoir bien d'autres qui vont être isolés en raison des inondations. Il va y avoir des routes qui vont être bloquées complètement, qui vont faire en sorte que des familles, des communautés, des personnes, des individus, des Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises seront isolés. Nous demandons à ces personnes d'évacuer. Vraiment, c'est ça qui est la meilleure chose qu'ils peuvent faire pour leur sécurité et pour la sécurité des premiers intervenants. Avec cela dit, nous comprenons pratiquement qu'il va y avoir des personnes qui voudront rester. Il y a des personnes qui voudront rester protéger leur maison, leur propriété, leurs atouts. Alors, pour ces personnes, on veut avoir une présence et avoir les bateaux et le personnel de la garde côtière va nous aider d'avoir une présence pour assurer leur sécurité, pour leur aider et leur appuyer. Mais on ne veut aucunement que les gens pensent, à cause que la garde côtière, à cause que d'autres personnels du gouvernement seront là en bateau pour aider les personnes, que nous sommes en train de les encourager de rester là. En effet, le contraire, des personnes qui sont affectées par les inondations, qui seront isolées à cause des routes qui seront inondées, on leur demande d'évacuer. Et si ils ont la famille ou des amis qui peuvent les héberger, parfait. Sinon, ils peuvent appeler 1-800-863-6582 pour parler à la Croix-Rouge pour avoir des personnes qui peuvent les héberger ou pour avoir une place qui pourrait les héberger.
Juste une question un peu comme John concernant les assurances en français, sachant qu'il y a certaines compagnies d'assurance justement qui offrent depuis quelques années des assurances pour les inondations. Est-ce que la province va se réserver le droit de refuser de l'aide financière à un sinistré, par exemple, qui a auparavant refusé une telle couverture? Puis si oui, comment le gouvernement va s'y prendre pour faire vérifier tout ça finalement?
À la fin de la journée, qu'est-ce qui est important, c'est que nous aidons les personnes qui vont avoir un fardeau financier en raison de ces inondations. Alors, je peux vous dire, avec le programme, c'est ça qui est le principe, c'est ça qui est le but. La seule chose qu'on veut surveiller, comme vous pouvez imaginer, malgré qu'on sympathise avec ces personnes qui sont affectées, on ne veut pas que le gouvernement devienne essentiellement l'assureur. Alors, on veut quand même que les gens vont prendre leur assurance si c'est possible. Les personnes qui ne peuvent pas se permettre de façon financière d'avoir ce genre d'assurance, le programme va leur aider. Pour les personnes qui avaient été chercher de l'assurance, mais qui ne savaient pas qu'ils peuvent avoir de l'assurance pour leur propriété qui leur protégerait des inondations, et ils ont continué, même si c'était disponible par la suite, ils ont continué avec leur assurance, on va être là pour les appuyer. On va faire en sorte qu'ils vont être capables de qualifier. Vraiment, à la fin de la journée, juste pour répéter, le principe, c'est juste qu'on ne veut pas que les gens se disent « je ne vais pas aller chercher de l'assurance parce que le gouvernement va toujours nous couvrir ». On veut que les personnes qui peuvent avoir l'assurance le font. Mais avec ce dit, ceux qui ne peuvent pas se permettre de se payer de l'assurance, ceux qui ont eu de l'assurance mais qui n'avaient pas dans ce temps-là la couverture pour des inondations, on sera là pour eux.
Quick question in relation to that. Is it the feds or the province who will assess the application?
So it's health and safety from the province, but it's all within the criteria of the federal government. And look, I don't think anybody's asked this yet, but it's been online a little bit, and I want us to be very upfront. I mean, some have talked about cottages being covered. It is the primary residence that is covered through the program, and that's because of the federal government's criteria. And if the federal government were to expand their criteria, we would be pleased to match it. But really, for us to be able to get the 90% coverage that we get from the disaster financial assistance with the federal government, we're going to follow their guidelines and their criteria.
Any more questions?
Excuse-moi, oui, excusez.
Excuse me. Do you mind if I answer your question in English?
Yes, I want to know exactly in terms of time consuming, what does this detour involve?
Yeah, well, first, as I said earlier, we have close to 141 impacted assets and 81 road closures, and appreciate the patience that the New Brunswickers continue to show around these road closures, impacted roads. And specifically to closure, we anticipate it's an extra 90 kilometers in detour. This closure, as I said, will be enacted today at 7 p.m. So it will be an extra 90 kilometers.
Okay.
Merci, thank you so much.
Merci tout le monde.
We'll
Thank
see
you,
you
everyone.
maybe tomorrow. So Mike in St. John, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.